The rain came down in sheets driven sideways by howling wind that screamed through the bare trees lining the deserted highway. It was near midnight on the outskirts of a quiet Midwestern town, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. The world was soaked cold and unforgiving. A German shepherd limped through the shadows of a narrow alley near the woods, ribs visible beneath his soaked, matted fur. His movements were slow, weary, each step the product of days without food, weeks without shelter. The cold bit into his bones, but hunger drove him forward, snout low, sniffing among overturned trash bins and scattered wrappers. His name once had been Max, but now he was nameless, just another stray. No one wanted another soul discarded by the world. As he scoured the alley for scraps, a faint sound drifted beneath the roar of the rain, barely audible, a high-pitched cry, soft and strained. He froze, ears flicking. There it was, again. Not the whimper of another dog, not a cat. It was human, a cry, a baby's cry. Max's head snapped toward the woods, toward a dark patch of overgrowth near the edge of the tree-line. He bolted toward it, paws splashing through shallow puddles, pushing through wet brush until he reached the sound. Tucked behind a log, almost hidden beneath branches and leaves, was a small white styrofoam box soaked and stained with mud and rain. It shifted slightly with the baby's movement inside. He approached cautiously, sniffing. The scent hit him. Newborn skin, milk, fear, and cold. Inside, barely covered by a thin towel, was a baby girl. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue. Her tiny hands trembled, her cries weakening. Something in Max snapped to life with no one around, no guidance, no reason. He acted. He gripped the corner of the box gently with his teeth and began dragging it inch by inch. He pulled it out of the bushes, scraping it across wet earth, slipping in the mud. The rain stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. He tugged it all the way to the edge of the road where headlights sometimes appeared in the distance before vanishing again into the storm. Then he stood guard. He barked at every car that passed. He barked with every ounce of strength left in his battered body, loud, urgent, pleading. The lights would slow, sometimes pause, but none stopped. The storm was too fierce. A barking dog in the middle of nowhere was just another danger to avoid. Still he barked, still he hoped. When his voice gave out, he whined. When no one came, he circled the box, curled his thin, shaking frame around the baby inside, and pressed his soaked body against the side of the foam to shield it from the wind. He lowered his head, ears twitching at every passing sound, eyes wide open, guarding through the night. A nameless dog, a nameless child, and a world that hadn't yet seen what love looked like when it had nothing left to lose. The night dragged on. The storm roared. But Max didn't move, because some protectors are born, not trained, and some hearts, no matter how broken, never stopped fighting to keep someone else alive. The storm had passed, leaving behind a soaked gray dawn. Clouds still loomed above, heavy and low, but the worst was over. Puddles shimmered on the road and leaves clung to every surface like nature itself had shuddered overnight. The world was wet and quiet, holding its breath after a night of chaos. Grace Thompson, a soft-spoken woman in her early 50s, zipped up her raincoat and stepped out of her driveway umbrella, in one hand, purse in the other. She had worked the morning shift at the local diner for over 20 years. Same route, same rhythm. But nothing about this morning was ordinary. As she neared the bend, just before the main road, she noticed something odd. In the distance, near the edge of the highway, a figure lay motionless, curled beside what looked like a plastic bin. Grace squinted. A dog, big, soaked to the bone. At first she thought it was dead, but then it moved barely. She quickened her pace, heart pounding. As she got closer, her breath caught. The German shepherd was curled tightly around a white styrofoam box, its sides dented and stained with mud. Paper scraps, wet leaves, and tiny footprints littered the area. The dog's ribs pushed visibly against his fur, and his body shivered uncontrollably, but he stayed in place, head resting protectively against the box. Grace's eyes widened. Was it food? A litter of puppies? No. Then she heard it, a sound soft, muffled, a faint cry. Her stomach dropped. She rushed forward, kneeling beside the dog. He lifted his head weakly, looked into her eyes, and gave a quiet, broken bark like he was pleading. Grace dropped her umbrella. With trembling hands, she pulled the lid off the box. Inside lay a newborn baby girl, barely moving, her tiny lips parted in a feeble gasp. Her skin was ice cold, her face pale, and her thin blanket soaked through. But she was alive. "Oh, my God," Grace whispered, hand flying to her mouth. She fumbled for her phone, dialing 9111 with fingers that could barely press the screen. "This is an emergency. I found a baby and a dog. I think he saved her." Within minutes, sirens echoed through the morning. An ambulance skidded to a stop on the wet pavement, followed closely by a police cruiser. EMTs rushed in, wrapping the infant in heated blankets, checking her vitals, whispering words. Grace couldn't hear. One of them, after glancing into the box, looked up at Grace with disbelief in his eyes. "This dog kept her warm all night?" he asked Grace. Nodded, he pulled her out of the woods. He got her to the road. He stayed, the dog still trembling. Eyes heavy, was carefully lifted and wrapped in a thick rescue blanket. Grace gently stroked his head. "You're a good boy," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You're her angel." The baby girl was later stabilized and placed in intensive care. Doctors said her survival was a miracle. If she'd been found even an hour later, it might have been too late. They called her Mira, meaning miracle. The dog, once nameless, was dubbed the Guardian. News spread fast. The local paper ran the headline, "Stray Dog Pulls Boxed Baby into Street Saves Life in Storm." By that evening, photos of the soaked dog and the baby wrapped in the medic's arms flooded social media, Twitter, lit up Facebook groups, shared the story with captions like, "Not all heroes wear capes, some have paws," "Guardian angel on 4 legs, he had no collar, no home but to mirror," and to everyone who now knew the story, he was everything. The hospital room was warm and filled with quiet beeping. Tiny Mirror lay curled in her incubator, wrapped in soft pink blankets, her chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. Nurses called her the miracle baby, and they weren't exaggerating. After just a few days of round-the-clock care, warmth, and nourishment, Mira began to recover at a pace that surprised even the doctors. Grace visited every day, sitting beside her, humming lullabies, whispering little promises. "You're safe now, sweet girl, we've got you." In a different wing of the facility at a nearby veterinary clinic, Guardian was receiving his own care. The vets found signs of old injuries, possibly from abuse, along with advanced malnutrition and a dangerous respiratory infection from the cold. He was quiet during the exams, eyes watching everyone, but never resisting. He only reacted when someone opened the door. His ears would perk up like he was hoping to see her. After both Mira and Guardian were declared stable, Grace, still shaken from the discovery but deeply moved, did something few would expect. She filed paperwork to temporarily foster them both. Not forever. She told the social worker just until the world makes sense again. Her request was approved, and the first night she brought them home, something shifted. Mira, bundled in her tiny crib near the living room window, stirred and fussed. Guardian patted over, slowly, his frame still thin but steadier now. He sat beside the crib and gently rested his head on the edge. Mira calmed instantly. It became their ritual. Wherever Mira went, Guardian followed. During the day, he lay beside her crib or curled beneath her stroller. When she cried, he would lick her hand until she giggled or drifted back to sleep. When Grace sat with Mira in her arms, Guardian would lie at their feet like a silent, devoted shadow. One morning, as Grace folded laundry on the couch, she heard a sharp squeal of laughter. She turned, startled. Guardian was nudging a small plush ball toward Mira's crib with his nose. It bounced gently against the rail, and Mira burst out laughing. Her very first laugh. Grace pressed a hand to her chest, tears welling. "You too," she whispered. You're already a team." Then came the night that solidified that truth. It was almost 200 a.m. Grace was deep in sleep when Guardian suddenly bolted from his spot by the crib. He sniffed at Mira, then let out a low, urgent bark. Mira wasn't breathing. Guardian barked louder, ran to Grace's bedroom, and jumped onto the bed, yanking at her blanket with his teeth, then barking again, faster, sharper. Grace jolted awake. "Guardian!" What she followed him, heart-hammering to the crib. Mira's face was red. Her lips were blue. Grace didn't hesitate. She called 911 with trembling fingers and began CPR. As the dispatcher guided her, paramedics arrived within minutes. Mira had suffered an acute allergic reaction, a rare one, sudden and dangerous. Later at the hospital, a pediatrician approached Grace with a look of grave honesty. If you'd found her even 5 minutes later, he shook his head, she wouldn't have made it. Grace sat beside Mira's hospital bed all night, holding the baby's hand in one and Guardian's paw in the other. "You did it again," she whispered to him. "You saved her again." The dog didn't move, but his eyes never left the crib. He had no words. He didn't need them. He was a guardian not in name but in purpose, and Mira was never alone. The community center was buzzing with energy. Balloons floated above booths lined with baked goods, handmade crafts, and colorful banners that read "Hearts for Hope," a fundraiser for orphan children. At the center of it all stood a small fenced stage, and beside it, tail gently wagging tongue out in a relaxed pant, sat Guardian, wearing a special red vest embroidered with white letters, "Miracle Dog." He'd become a local legend, not just for saving baby Mira from the storm or for alerting Grace during her medical emergency, but for simply existing as living proof that love, loyalty, and instinct could thrive even after abandonment. Children lined up to take pictures with him. Some brought treats, others hugs. Mira, now nearly 1 year old, sat in Grace's lap under a shaded canopy, giggling as Guardian licked her fingers. The event was peaceful, joyful, until it wasn't. Amid the music and laughter, Guardian suddenly stiffened. His ears shot forward, his nose lifted into the air, sniffing alert. He stood in the distance, near the back entrance. A man moved awkwardly against the crowd flow. Dressed in dark clothes, hat pulled low, he clutched something inside his jacket. His eyes darted left and right. Guardian growled. At first no one noticed, but when the man reached for the inner pocket and began moving toward the display table for auction, items Guardian snapped into action. He leapt over the small stage fence, barking, loud, fast, relentless. The man flinched. The crowd turned, startled by the sudden outburst. Guardian didn't hesitate. He charged, intercepting the man, just as his hand emerged with a weapon, what appeared to be a small pistol. The shepherd lunged, biting down on the man's forearm, causing the weapon to fall to the ground with a clatter. Screams erupted. Parents pulled their children back. Grace grabbed Mira and ducked behind a nearby table. The man tried to shake Guardian off, but the dog held firm, barking fiercely, forcing him down to the pavement. Within seconds, 2 off-duty officers who had been attending the event ran in, weapons drawn, and subdued the suspect. Later, police confirmed the man had a history of theft and violent incidents. His intent that day was unclear, but whatever it was, Guardian had stopped it before anyone could be hurt. The footage spread like wildfire. Local news anchors spoke with awe. Guardian, the stray who once shielded a baby in the storm, has done it again, this time protecting an entire crowd. The headline on the evening news read, "We a hero, the dog who saved 2 lives." Guardian was once again hailed as a protector, a miracle, a symbol of everything pure and instinctively good. He didn't bask in the spotlight, didn't know the world was watching. After the chaos, all he wanted was to return to Mira's side, lie at her feet, and rest. Because for Guardian, being a hero wasn't about headlines, it was about watching, protecting, and never letting anyone he loved face danger alone. The years passed gently, as if the storm that once brought them together had long since blown away, leaving only light behind Grace, once a woman who walked to work in quiet solitude, now walked through life with two companions who had changed everything. She had officially adopted Mira the year she turned 2, signing the papers with tears in her eyes, and Guardian sitting loyally at her feet, as if he too understood the significance. Guardian, in turn, was no longer just a miracle dog. He was family to honor the journey that began on that stormy night. Grace launched the Mira and Guardian Project, a nonprofit that provided emergency aid and long-term support for abandoned children and stray animals. The mission was simple: give second chances to those the world had forgotten. The organization flourished. Volunteers poured in shelters, partnered fundraisers sold out, and everywhere you looked. Inside the rescue center, there were photos of Mira, of Guardian, of that muddy styrofoam bee, and the impossible bond that saved 2 lives. Then came the day of the Animal Bravery Honor Ceremony. It was held in the town square where Guardian stood on the small wooden stage, his coat glistening in the sun, a special medal hanging from a blue velvet ribbon around his neck. Grace held Mira in her arms as she approached the microphone. "He wasn't trained to save lives," she said, voice breaking, "just dead. When no one else was watching, when no one else came, he did, and because of that I have a daughter. Because of that we are a family." As the crowd rose in applause, Mira wriggled out of Grace's arms, ran to Guardian, and threw her arms around his thick neck. "My puppy hero," she shouted, grinning. The crowd laughed and clapped again, but Guardian just sat there, eyes calm, tail wagging slowly, as if he already knew. Years later, on a soft spring afternoon, the backyard was filled with the sound of little paws and joyful yelps. 3 puppies' guardians chased butterflies in each other beneath the wide oak tree. Guardian lay in the grass, older now, muzzle graying, but eyes warm as ever. Beside him, Mirror, now 5, lay on her belly, with a picture book, one hand gently resting on Guardian's back, the other turning pages. "You still love stories, huh?" she whispered. Smiling, Guardian huffed softly, closing his eyes, and in that moment, peaceful, complete, there was no storm, no box, no loneliness, only the quiet legacy of a dog who had given everything and received everything in return. Some souls aren't taught how to love or protect. They're born knowing, even if no one's watching, even if the world has turned its back, because heroes sometimes come with 4 legs and a heart that never gives up. He had no name, no collar, no home, but he had a heart brave enough to save a baby, and a soul loyal enough to protect her for a lifetime. From the cold streets to the warmest place in a child's heart. Guardian reminded us that true heroes don't ask for recognition. They just show up again and again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, where we bring you the most powerful true stories of love, loyalty, and the animals who change our lives forever. Because sometimes the ones the world throws away are the ones who save it